I never imagined the day my marriage almost ended would begin with a simple dinner invitation. It was supposed to be an ordinary night, just me and my husband, Marcos, sharing a meal at his mother's house. The evening air was heavy and humid, the kind that clings to your skin and makes the world seem just a little too close. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the cracked window shutters. The faint scent of wilting roses mingled with the stale aroma of old wood and faded upholstery, wrapping the house in an unsettling nostalgia that felt colder than the temperature suggested. As I sat down at the dinner table, directly across from Rosa, Marcos's mother, I couldn't shake the prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, didn't meet mine with the warmth I had come to expect from family. Instead, they skimmed over me like I was something uninvited, a mistake. The corners of her mouth were tight, lips pressed thin with contained disdain. The clinking of cutlery against plates filled the silence that seemed heavier than before, more suffocating. I felt as if I was walking on fragile ice, one false move away from sinking into a pit of confrontation and resentment I hadn't anticipated. The meal itself was bland, but the atmosphere was suffocating. Each time Marcos smiled at me, hoping to bridge the ever-growing chasms of tension, Rosa's eyes would dart away, refusing to acknowledge our bond. The way she spoke, the quiet pauses before her words fell, carried sharp edges. "You know, Marcos deserves someone better," she murmured between bites, not loud enough for Marcos, but loud enough for me to catch each poisonous syllable. It was subtle, yet deliberate, like a serpent whispering just beneath the surface of calm water. At first, I tried to dismiss it, telling myself, it's just her way. But the chill that settled in my chest told a different story. I could feel it creeping under my skin, these barbs hidden in casual remarks that eroded my confidence. When Marcos excused himself to take a phone call, Rosa's gaze lingered on me, unblinking, cold. The silence between us stretched like a taut wire, straining to snap. Leaving the house that night, the darkness outside felt heavier, more oppressive, as if the shadows themselves were watching, waiting. Her words replayed inside my mind, twisted and curling like smoke around my thoughts. They followed me home, seeping into our quiet space and turning it into a fragile battlefield. The usual warmth I shared with Marcos had cracked under the weight of whispered doubts and unspoken accusations. I could no longer pretend it was harmless. Something inside me shattered in that moment. The woman who had once welcomed me with open arms was now the source of a silent war, one I hadn't even seen coming. My marriage, my sanctuary, was under attack, and the enemy wasn't some stranger or distant threat. It was Rosa, my own mother-in-law, quietly unraveling the life Marcos and I had built together. I sat alone that night, the faint ticking of the clock suddenly amplified in the heavy silence of our home. My hands trembled slightly, the weight of realization crushing my chest. She was determined to destroy us, and if I didn't act fast, I could lose everything I held dear. I didn't know yet how deep her interference ran, but the cold certainty nestled in my heart whispered one thing loud and clear. The battle had only just begun, and it was going to break me. Marcos and I had been married for almost 20 years, 2 decades filled with memories, shared dreams, and the steady rhythm of life side by side. He was my rock, the one person who knew my fears and hopes better than anyone else. We fought, yes, like any couple. But those fights were like storms passing through. They battered us, sure, but every single time, love was the anchor that brought us back to shore. Our marriage, in my eyes, was solid, unbreakable. At least, that's what I believed. Until she came into the picture, not in person, always lurking in the shadows. My husband's mother, Rosa. Rosa was a force. Within our family, she was known as a strong woman, a matriarch whose word carried weight and whose presence filled every room before she even spoke. But behind that strength lurked something far darker, a controlling nature wrapped in a veneer of civility. I'd known she could be difficult from the start, a storm cloud on our horizon, but I naively hoped that marriage would soften her grip on both Marcos and me. I told myself she'd come around, that with time the tension would ease. But that hope was shattered like fragile glass, cut into pieces by Rosa's persistent determination to keep us apart. Sometimes it felt like she was more of a shadow than a mother, a looming presence that crept into the corners of our home, into the quiet spaces between Marcos and me, poisoning what should have been sacred ground. It was subtle at first, a whispered word here, a sarcastic smile there, but carefully honed like a hunter, Rosa chipped away at Marcos's trust in me, slowly, methodically. I found myself sinking under the weight of sly comments she threw into conversations, false stories I couldn't even begin to explain to him. It was like waking each day and stepping onto shifting sands, never knowing if the ground beneath my feet would collapse. Every time I tried, really tried, to talk to Marcos about what I was sensing, he dismissed my fears. "She's just protective," he said with a reassuring smile that barely masked his own confusion. But I knew the truth. It was more than protection. It was deliberate sabotage. Rosa wasn't just defending her son, she was dismantling the life Marcos and I had built, piece by piece. The words she planted were seeds of doubt, growing thorny vines twisting between us, choking the love that once seemed so unshakable. The nights grew colder not because of the weather, but because of the distance spreading silently between Marcos and me. Conversations that once ran deep and free became clipped and cautious. Laughter that filled the rooms grew quieter. Even moments of touch felt weighted, burdened with unsaid things and hidden fears. I was fighting harder than ever, holding on with trembling hands to the man I loved, but it was like grasping at smoke, intangible and slipping away. With every passing day, the space she created widened, and as I watched from the outside, powerless and aching, I realized that love, as strong as I believed it to be, was no match for the poison lurking in the shadows, coming, heartbreakingly enough, from the woman who gave Marcos life. The tension at home grew thicker each day, settling over us like a suffocating fog that no sunlight could penetrate. I walked on eggshells, my nerves fraying at the edges, every word weighed carefully before it left my lips. I was afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of asking Marcos for his attention, afraid that any spark of anger, frustration, or doubt in my voice might be twisted into proof of guilt. Rosa operated like a shadow puppeteer, always one step ahead, whispering poisonous lies into Marcos's ears, her words weaving a web thick with deceit, distortion, and manipulation. Every truth we shared was bent and folded until it was unrecognizable, untrustworthy. One evening, the air in our home was heavy, the kind of stillness that presses into your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I was passing by the living room when I noticed Marcos sitting unusually still, his voice hushed in conversation. Rosa's presence filled the room like a sinister fog, unseen but felt, a chilling current weaving between them. I froze, silent, as I eavesdropped from the doorway. Her voice was low, laced with venom disguised as maternal concern. She whispered carefully chosen poison into his ear, questions and implications about my faithfulness. She told him I was hiding things, that I wasn't the woman he had thought he knew so well. The words slithered through the room, invasive and corrosive. I felt the cold slide down my spine, a sudden icy rush surging through my veins, freezing my heart in place. This was no longer subtle distrust. It was sabotage at its most ferocious. It shattered me. Not because I doubted myself, never that, but because the man I loved, who had always stood beside me, seemed to hesitate for the very first time. His eyes, usually warm and sure when they met mine, flickered with uncertainty, shadowed by the doubts Rosa had implanted. That night, the distance between us grew into a vast, silent canyon. Marcos began pulling away emotionally, his warmth replaced by a guarded reserve that curled around him like armor. He questioned things I had never imagined he would, questions that hung in the air like sharp knives, cutting through the trust we'd built over years. Arguments erupted over the smallest misunderstandings, battles fueled by miscommunications that Rosa's venomous words had poisoned. I tried to explain, to reach him, but my voice faltered against the fog of suspicion that clouded his judgment. I felt utterly trapped, like I was fighting an enemy I couldn't see, surrounded in a battlefield where the air itself was weaponized against me. Rosa wasn't just jealous or protective anymore. She was deliberately, ruthlessly trying to dismantle our life together. She wasn't just a presence. She was a force intent on destruction. Every night, lying alone beside Marcos's cold back, I felt more isolated, a ghost in my own home. This invisible war was ripping us apart, and I knew in my heart that if I didn't find a way to stop it soon, the man I loved would slip through my fingers and become a stranger completely. The very thought of that haunted me in the darkest hours, the frightening possibility that love, no matter how deep, can be corroded, poisoned, and lost. The breaking point crashed down on me one cold, restless night when I stumbled upon a message on Marcos's phone that shattered everything I thought I knew. It wasn't from me. It was from Rosa. The glow of the screen illuminated the dark room, casting harsh light on words that stabbed deep. Cruel accusations, manipulative pleas urging Marcos to choose her over me, to question the very foundation of our shared past. The message twisted our memories like a knife turning inside a wound, attempting to rewrite the history we had built together, making it seem like nothing more than a fragile illusion. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat echoing through the silence of the night. The air felt thick, heavy with betrayal, suffocating, and I struggled to breathe as the weight of her poisonous intentions pressed down on me. Every lie Rosa had whispered, every falsehood designed to sow doubt, now lay bare in stark digital text. I knew then the war was no longer hidden in whispered comments. It had erupted into a brutal, undeniable assault on our love. That night, I confronted Marcos. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the clock. With trembling hands, I handed him the phone, watching as his eyes scanned the messages. At first, his gaze hardened, not at Rosa, but at me. Anger flickered across his face like a storm, accusations unspoken, yet heavy in the air. It was the hardest moment I had ever faced. The man I loved doubting me, even briefly, because of his mother's venomous lies. Slowly, though, the fog began to lift. The confusion in his eyes gave way to pain, and then to understanding. The truth cracked through his defenses like shards of light-piercing darkness. For the first time, Marcos saw Rosa for what she truly was, the woman deliberately trying to dismantle the life we had fought so hard to create. It was a devastating revelation, the kind that churns your stomach and wraps around your soul. Emotions ran raw and fierce between us, the kind of painful honesty that breaks and rebuilds all at once. Tears streamed silently down my face as I poured out everything I felt, the betrayal, the fear, the endless battle I'd fought alone. Marcos admitted, with a heavy heart, that he had been swayed, misled by the person he once trusted most, the very person who should have protected us both. But in the midst of that admission, his words held a fragile promise. He still loved me. That stillness, that unwavering thread of love, became the fragile lifeline we clung to in that dark hour. Together, we made a decision that night, a vow to reclaim our marriage from the shadow Rosa had cast. It was time to set boundaries, to build walls around our relationship that no one else could tear down. We refused to be prisoners of her interference any longer. It was a daunting step, one fraught with uncertainty and pain, but necessary if we were to survive. The fight was far from over. No, this was just the beginning of a new battle, one we would have to face side by side. But in that moment, as we locked eyes, the battle lines were clear. The enemy was known, and we were ready to confront her together. Looking back, it's almost unbearable to think how close I was to losing Marcos, and, in the process, losing myself, in that suffocating war of silence and betrayal. Those days are etched into my memory like dark scars, raw and aching, reminders of a time when fear and doubt felt like shadows creeping into every corner of our lives. The weight of Rosa's interference threatened not just our marriage, but my very sense of who I was. Yet, amid all that darkness, I found something unexpected, a fierce strength buried deep within me, a quiet fire that refused to be extinguished. Our marriage didn't survive by chance. It survived because, against every whisper of doubt and every silent tear, we chose truth over lies, honesty over concealment. Communication became our weapon in a battlefield that felt impossible to navigate. We dove into the painful conversations, the ones that unravel old wounds and force raw feelings into the light. Each dialogue peeled away the layers of mistrust that Rosa's silent poison had woven between us. It wasn't easy. A shattered trust isn't mended overnight. There were moments when I thought the fractures were too wide to bridge, when the weight of betrayal almost crushed the hope I clung to. But we fought through the shadows and pain because we refused to let those toxic chains define us. What I learned, though, is something I wish someone had told me from the beginning. Love, no matter how deep or true, is sometimes not enough when family interference turns poisonous. You must fight for your happiness, for your peace of mind, even if that fight means standing up to the very person who gave you the one you love. It isn't a battle anyone wants, but sometimes it's the only way to protect what's precious. You learn that love requires more than devotion. It demands courage, boundaries, and an unwillingness to let external forces dictate your fate. Now, when I walk beside Marcos, the weight of that hard-earned lesson fills my heart. We still see the scars left by Rosa's shadow, but we also feel the strength in us, the bond forged in fire, in pain, and in quiet resilience. Love, I've come to understand, isn't just soft embraces and whispered promises. Sometimes love means battle. Sometimes love means victory. I survived her relentless attempts to break us. I'm standing here now, stronger, wiser, and more certain than ever that the past, no matter how dark, does not define the future. If you find yourself trapped in a similar fight, know this: you are not alone. You can survive this too. You can reclaim your peace. You can choose love, real love for yourself and for the ones worth fighting for, and turn your darkest fears into your most powerful strength.